We're South Gloucestershire and Stroud College, and we're going to be delivering the 5 top tips for teaching online with Microsoft Teams. Just to give you some background on SGS College and where it's at with Microsoft Teams, we started around 18 months ago with introducing Microsoft Teams to the college. The initial introduction was on a small scale, so we did a 6-month trial basis. And when we moved to September 2019, we made the whole college go live with Microsoft Teams as our virtual learning environment. So there's a bit of background around how we migrated to this system. So just to give you some information on myself, I'm Alex Gager, Learning Area Manager. I've worked in FE for 11 years within sport and public services, and now the Learning Area Manager. And I'm supported by my colleague, Lee Chambers, who is a senior lecturer, but is also absolutely at the forefront in implementing the Microsoft Teams platform within the college, has been in contact with Microsoft throughout this process, and is continually developing the platform to ensure that it moves forward with learning and enhances learning. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the structure. If we could cue video, please, Van.
This is the structure of Microsoft Teams adopted by Academic Sport and Public Services at SGS College. Teams can be structured in a number of different ways. Through the use of channels, for remote delivery, through the use of tabs for third-party applications such as websites and Microsoft Stream. And finally, through the use of private channels.
Thank you, Van. So I'm going to talk about the structure of Microsoft Teams, and this is our first handy hint, really. So since the launch of Microsoft Teams at the start of the academic year, the structure of Teams has been really important for both staff and students to easily navigate through their teams. The structure that we've adopted within our department and a number of departments across college has been that units of study or modules are hosted as separate channels. Within these channels, all unit material, resources, and files linked to those particular modules are uploaded to their channels. This allows students to easily navigate between their units of study and find information really quickly. Since moving to remote delivery since lockdown, an effective tool has been staff adding online delivery channels. These channels have been really useful for students to easily access remote materials and webinars, with webinars being posted to these channels. The use of tabs has enabled students to easily locate key information. It's been most impactful. One of the most impactful tools has been Microsoft Stream as a tab. What staff have done is they've uploaded their webinars to Microsoft Stream. This has been hosted within the Stream tab. And what we found is that a number of our students are working on the front line, especially within supermarkets. So they may not be able to access live content. They can simply go to the Stream tab, click the webinar that they've missed, and then pose questions as a result of this. The addition of private channels have provided a platform where students can collaborate in small groups on a needs-to-know basis with limited lecture engagement and collaborate in smaller teams. Next video, please, Van.
This is how the Sport and Public Services Department at SGS College use Teams for communication. Firstly, the use of the chat function to speak to learners and other members of staff. The use of the call function to face-to-face conversation or video chat. The use of group chats to speak to more than one person at a time. And finally, the use of announcements and app mentions within channels.
So next handy hint, or hint two, is communication within teams. So the use of Teams for communication has been one of the most powerful tools for our department. It has transformed how staff and students communicate on a day-to-day basis, and it's been really effective since lockdown. Staff and students have been using the one-to-one chat feature for check-ins, catch-ups, direct questioning, and informal work submissions and progress checks. Staff have created group chats for classes to keep students up to date with key information. Students have preferred this to putting information on channels because key information on channels can be lost. So updates, regular posts have been posted by both staff and students within these group chats. Departments have also created group chats for general conversation and keeping up to date with department information. The call function. This has been really well utilised within our department, especially within our in-class support workers. A particular example would be with our learners with special educational needs. They've been able to call learners after webinars have taken place and just catch up and make sure that they understand what has been asked of them within that particular webinar. And then finally, the use of announcements and app mentioned. As you hopefully saw from the video, the use of announcements enables a clear structure to your team, and they can highlight key information so learners can easily navigate throughout it. App mentions as well also highlights key information, and you can target either groups or individuals to make sure that they see their notifications. Next video, please, Vaz.
Microsoft Teams allows you to schedule meetings to the channels, adding all learners and notifying them of when their sessions will take place. Microsoft Teams allows you to share screens and PowerPoints live in webinars with learners. They've added an interactive whiteboard which enables you to collaborate with the learners on a whiteboard space. Team meetings. So Microsoft Teams are evolving all the time and they're adding new features. When it first launched, it was a very simple feature in the fact that you could just hold sort of a video conference with a variety of number of people in there. However, there are lots of additions that are being made, and especially during this COVID period. In the first instance, the scheduling meetings is absolutely essential. So they have the traditional method, which is the same as creating a calendar slot and inviting colleagues. So if I was going to invite Lee, my colleague, to a meeting, I can just schedule it in Microsoft Teams. Or if I wanted to invite a select number of students, I can do that. However, they also allow you to select or schedule meetings per channel, i.e. per the unit. So you can select the channel that the webinar is going to be launched from, the day, the time, so that you're almost creating a webinar timetable within the learner's Microsoft Teams. This is good because obviously you don't have to input the learners every time. It's there, you know it's there, the learners know where to go and find it and how to log in. So it's a really nice feature. The second feature, which I know Lee has touched on already, is the record feature. At the beginning of our webinars, what we do is we record every single one of them right from the off. So the moment a learner joins the webinar is the moment we click the record feature. The beauty of it is obviously that, like Lee said, a lot of the learners are now going to work in supermarkets, and some of them are working for 40 plus hours a week. So they can revisit that content and they can go back and they can look at the learning and then apply it to what they're studying. The other factor is around safeguarding, and actually the safeguarding of learners and the safeguarding of staff, that we have to make sure that that's recorded so that everybody is safeguarded. And that's also an important feature when we're conducting one-to-ones. Every member of staff is expected that they record their meetings and video chats. There's a screen share feature. The screen share feature, which is similar in any sort of online webinar, which is Zoom. You can basically share your screen, you can share your PowerPoint documents, but there is also a whiteboard feature, and the whiteboard feature enables the learners to interact on that as well. So if you're drawing, for instance, in the video example, I was doing ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and I was drawing that up, and I said, well, actually, what happens next? A learner could take over that whiteboard and draw on there too to demonstrate their understanding. I've seen some really good examples with maths during this COVID period. And then the learner-led feature. So when learners are using, or when you set up meetings, you can set them up so that learners can lead them. So for instance, they can share their screen, they can share their video of them. So we've had examples of learners leading fitness instructor sessions, just like Joe Wicks, to demonstrate understanding of how to conduct a fitness session, also coaching sessions, as well as assessments with our foundation and degree learners, delivering them online. Some really nice features that we've seen to try and increase learner engagement, because some of these webinars can be kind of a little bit dry in the sense that we talk into a screen and it lacks atmosphere. So the first things they come in to do is, right, bang, here's a question, a sport quiz. They're involved and engaged in that quiz to get some energy into the room. The other thing I've seen people do is music quizzes, although it's not subject specific, it's a starter. It gives them something that they're engaging with the moment that they come through that into that learning environment. And then lastly is what's in the news. We'll be sharing some things in the news, and there could be some discussion points around it. Another feature that we've had is to welcome guests into our webinars so that we get some conversation bouncing off each other. Because what we find is that learners in these platforms, they tend to take the quiet approach, and they sit back and they're watching and they engage through the chat, but they don't necessarily engage through the audio. And when you start to have conversations with others in that room, that starts to get the students and the learners engaging in that conversation through an audio feature. Cue video, please, Van. New features in Microsoft PowerPoint allow you to record slide by slide, adding animation and audio, enabling you to create a nice flipped learning product. In addition, Microsoft PowerPoint has a screen recording feature which enables you to film any document web page and export as an MP4. Okay, so PowerPoint, this is a feature in that Microsoft have added over the last few years. So slide recordings. The first thing that they've added is you can now record slides, and what it allows you to do is do a recording per slide. So when you do that, it picks up your audio so that you can talk over the slide. You can also add annotations to the slides. And then when you finish with that slide, it stops the recording, ready for the next slide that you're going to talk about. When you share that file, so if you were to upload that file to Microsoft Teams, the learner just goes on and views it through a presentation view or a slideshow view, and they would then receive the audio and the annotations playing through it. They wouldn't see it if they just opened up a PowerPoint ordinarily. They need to go through the slideshow view to be able to see the recordings and the annotations. The screen recording feature is a really nice feature in PowerPoint, and it's on PowerPoint on the PC version, the latest version of PowerPoint on the PC version. I'm actually using a Mac, so I haven't got it on here. However, there are lots of screen recording features out there, so it's not just PowerPoint that does it. I use something called QuickTime on my Mac. The screen recording feature I've been using for a long time on my Mac. The reason for it is that actually you can record any window. So if you're looking at a website and you want to talk about a website, you can talk about that. If you're looking at a Word document, you can talk about that. How I've used it is that I record assignment briefs, because what happens is with learners on BTEC qualifications in particular is that when you share that information, they often forget that. And so what I do is I record the assignment brief walkthrough, give them some advice and guidance, then I upload that to YouTube so that they can revisit that and they have the link. You can do exactly that in PowerPoint. Finally, the last point is around flipped learning, and this is what many of our lecturers have been doing who have childcare. So they've got children in the day and they haven't been able to deliver to the learners in the day. So what they've done is in the evening, they've gone onto their PowerPoint, they've taught the lesson without learners present and given them all the information, and then they've shared the video recording so that the learners can then go on and watch it, learn about it, and then they can come back to them in the chat. It's almost like a flipped learning approach, and that's been highly effective. Learners can also use these features. So if they're looking to create an assessment, they can record their own PowerPoints and they can share them with you, providing their narrative or their audio over the top, and then you can make assessment decisions from this. Cue video, please, Van.
This is Microsoft Forms with SGS College. Microsoft Forms has two options, either to create a survey or a quiz. The quiz feature in Forms allows you to create multiple choice questions which marks immediately, and also open answered questions which you can review. You can share through QR codes and links, and you can review the answers through the analytics feature.
This brings us on to Microsoft Forms. So Forms, effectively, there's two features to it. There's a feature which is a survey feature which you can collect information from. So we use it for things like voice of the learner, destination data, to collect that information at the end of the year. Right, what are you going on to do? Learners fill out that form. We get evidence that pulls it into the form, gives us an Excel spreadsheet, and then we can say, well, actually X, Y, and Z went on to do this, and we've got some data that's collected there. The other feature in Forms is quiz, and the quiz feature, you can create an assessment effectively. So if you use the multiple choice option or the short answered option, you can get instant feedback from that. And the beauty of that is that, you know, learners they answer the questions, and instantly, as soon as they submit, the feedback comes through, whether they're right or wrong. You can also have open answered questions. The difference with the open answered questions is when they submit it, it doesn't give them instant feedback, and it requires the lecturer to go into the form and to mark it and then release the feedback to the learners. There are multiple share features on Microsoft Forms. There's a QR code, there's URL links, there's embed features, so you can share the link into your Microsoft Teams. But prior to lockdown, at the beginning of each of my lessons, what I did is I got a QR code with the form. I stuck it on the door, and then when learners came to the lesson, they scanned the code, and before they've even entered that room, they are engaging with material, and there's a check on learning from the previous lesson. It gives you analytics. So when you go into your form, you will be able to see who's answered what the breakdown is, what the average score is, how long it's taken them to answer the questions. So there's a really nice analytics feature that's built within Forms. But just because it's Microsoft Forms doesn't mean that you won't have access to it. There's Google Forms, there's Microsoft Forms, and both of these features are free, providing you've got a Google account, a Gmail account effectively, or an Outlook or Hotmail account. They are part of that package. Like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft Forms, you can use it through the door. So as I say, engaging them immediately. It can be used as an assignment feature in Teams, so you can set it on the assignment tab. However, Microsoft Forms does have to be completed there and then, so it can't be something that you come back to and add to. It does have to be submitted in one sitting, so it would be more beneficial for sort of portfolio-based assessments or quick assessments where you're generating some evidence or generating some reflection and then they're submitting there and then. We've used it for webinar checks. So if you're going into a webinar, you've taught something, and you create a form and you want to check that the learner's got the understanding, you then share the link within the chat feature, learners complete that, and then you've got an understanding of how much information they've processed and what their understanding base is. It also allows you to inform your teaching. So once you get that information and you review the analytics, you know actually the knowledge base on this part is not where I want it to be. I need to now refocus my teaching around this area. And there is a small image, and I know it's small, but there is some kind of an image of the analytics there on that slide. The last bit we want to talk about is the analytics of Teams itself. And this diagram here shows what Teams has looked like pre, during, COVID. So you can see the months of February and March, there's interaction on Teams just through being used as a VLE. But where you see the spikes increase around the 22nd of March, that is where Microsoft Teams was our primary delivery. And so we were delivering webinars, holding chat features, and you can see that spiky profile there. We have had huge engagement with Microsoft Teams. Learners have been turning up. We've had great attendance across the board. You always have some that go missing, but largely it's been really popular. The bit where you see the spikes dip off there around the April time, that's where Easter break is. And as a college, we had a complete shutdown for that Easter break, apart from touching base with vulnerable learners. So our learner services stayed open, but actually the delivery and everything else was finished. And then you can see it picks back up in April, but it's starting to drop off now because our delivery is starting to come to an end. I held Voice of the Learner yesterday, and the feedback, there was 15 learners across a range of courses, and we have 450 learners in sport and public services. And the feedback was very consistent. And one learner said the transition from face-to-face delivery to Microsoft Teams has been absolutely seamless. And I'm delighted to know that that's what's happened, because it says to me that they've had a positive learning experience and they've been able to access everything they would, just as they would in college. Thank you for listening to both myself and Lee. We hope that you've got some value from that session. We welcome you to ask questions. And if you do want to get in touch with us, we are on @academicsport_wise on Twitter, and we would be more than happy to speak to you via that platform.
Thank you, gents. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A tab you might want to have a look at. Are tutors able to see analytics on Teams?
Yes, absolutely. Lee, do you want to give some details on the analytics and how you view?
Yeah, happy to. I was just answering that question actually by typing it. Yeah, so with the analytics, any owner of a team can see the analytics for the group. All you have to do is click in, once you're in the team, click Manage Team, and there's an Analytics tab in there, and it will give you the graphic that Alex showed in the presentation. So yeah, any owner of a team can see their groups or their team's analytics.
Thank you. There's another one here, Lee. Can you create breakout rooms like in some for small group discussion?
Yeah, so at present, no, but I know this is something that Microsoft are working on. I don't know how much people know about it, but actually Microsoft Teams has come a long way just in the last couple of months in terms of, I think their hand's been forced in terms of introducing more teaching and learning friendly tools within meetings. So, for example, at the start of the year, there was no hands up option. There's limited resource in terms of whiteboard, but those changes have been very quick in turnaround. But I know it is something they're working on at the moment. Ways that, as a department, we've worked around that is actually allowing learners to dip out of the meeting and have calls themselves and have conversations, and then give them the time to rejoin the meeting. And that's one thing we have done to kind of combat that, really.
Great idea. I have tried to set up my own webinar on Microsoft Teams, and it required an encoder. I've no idea how to get around this. Have you ever seen that?
I've not seen it. It would be a software issue. We don't deal with some of the back house stuff, but yeah, it would be a software requirement. I don't know the details on that. Just on what Lee said about the update, there is a community on Microsoft Teams, and lecturers and any teaching staff can go on there and post ideas of what they like. And depending on how many people kind of respond to that and get behind it, it tends to push it up the list. So Microsoft then go, right, okay, we're going to start to tackle that as our next project.
Here's a fun one. What is the disadvantage for having a channel for each lecturer on a course?
I don't know whether the disadvantage is necessarily the right way to phrase it. I think there's a variety of different ways of doing it. The reason why we have channels is because we have multiple units. And so we like to separate out our learning, but we use the general channel as general information to be shared. And then the subject specific stuff gets filled into the channels themselves, the subject channels.
Yeah, and I think kind of going on with that as well, Alex, in our college we have, I don't know, let's say 64 different awarding bodies, lots of different curriculum areas, and no model is the same. So you have to think about what model or what structure will work well for what you're trying to produce. And if it is having individual lectures as channels, great. If it is having modules, you just need to think about what will work well for your department and what you're trying to get across to your learners.
That sounds great. We've got quite a few questions which have come in, which are along the lines of, can we watch this again? Is it recorded? Will I get a copy of this? We will be sending everybody by email a link to catch up to a recording of this session after the event. Oh, there's a good question. Safeguarding. Is a recording the only way to safeguard?
That's a college policy that's been adopted at SGS. So the reason for recording is so that it can be viewed back. So if for instance, somebody puts in something and says this happened, the recording should be there, just like you would if you had a call center, and actually it can be reviewed and gone back through. So it's just, for me, I think it's about safeguarding yourself as a member of staff, and also safeguarding the learners so that they're clear that actually this is being recorded, and the behaviours have to be positive behaviours that we'd expect in industry for us, because obviously we're working in an FE environment. So that's the way that the college has decided to take that approach.
Thank you, gents. We're going to have to call the session to an end. It's been very well received. Lots of people have put thanks up for lots of food for thought and great tips. I guess they're going to be dipping in, and you may end up getting some questions after the event as well. So thanks to you, Alex and Lee, and thank you to all you delegates who've attended.